What's up, everyone? Sorry for the delay there. You're back with me, Ian Kane, and a huge welcome to this week's installment of DappRadar Meets. The date is Wednesday, April 20th. A big hello to everyone out there. It's great to see you all, and as always, it's great to see all those avatar pictures. It's really cool. So, let's just quickly dive in and make sure I've got Eric there on the line. Hey, Eric, are you there?
Yeah, Ian. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Okay, I'm just going to run through a few bits of admin, Eric, and then we'll jump straight in, okay? So give me a few minutes and then I'll come back to you, all right?
No problem.
So, what's been going on in the world of dapps this week? Some pretty big stuff already, and it's only Wednesday. So the two kind of standout events that have happened so far this week, one I've just written about actually to do with rumors surrounding ApeCoin, which is the official token of the Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT collections. And there's a forthcoming project by Yuga Labs, the owner, called Other Side. And basically what's happened is somebody's dropped a bit of a speculative tweet out there on the 18th of April, stating that some of these BAYC, MAYC collections will be able to get on a whitelist to buy lands in this forthcoming Yuga Labs Other Side metaverse. So it's obviously caused a bit of a stir. The price has gone up around 45% in the last 3 days, and there's potential that it'll keep going up as well as the rumors keep moving around. So that was pretty cool. So that happened today, actually. We saw that. And then another thing that happened over the weekend, actually, was a NFT collection called Moonbirds. And this is a collection by a collective called the Proof Collective, who I've been looking at recently because the concept is really cool. They've kind of created this exclusive members club. And within 2 days of the official mint, these pixelated birds have set some pretty impressive records. It's 10,000 NFTs in the collection, and it's developed as an avatar collection. And it launched on April 16th and already has a secondary market floor price of 19.59 ETH. Just a couple of days. So pretty crazy stuff there as well. So yeah, interesting things happening. Loads more on the DappRadar blog as always. So now to the main event. Today, I'm excited to welcome Eric Kang from Avalanche. So we've already done our sound check, so Eric is there with us. And I just want to make sure everybody's aware that we always record these sessions for people to catch up later. So if you missed out on any of the previous ones, you can get them on YouTube. Just head over, search DappRadar, and you'll find hundreds of videos there. Also, today is about asking questions. If there are people in the audience that have questions for Eric, please put your hand up and I will get to those questions and I will either bring you on stage, or if you choose, you can send a message into the DappRadar general chat and we'll read those questions out for Eric to answer. So remember, that's one of the reasons we're here today. So if you've got any questions, please throw them out. And I always say there's no such thing as a stupid question, only if it's asked 3 or 4 times. So keep your ears open and make sure you're not repeating somebody else's question. All right, Eric, let's jump straight in to Avalanche. So at the beginning, what I always do is this thing I call an elevator pitch. I like you to pretend that you're basically stuck with me in an elevator for about a minute. I want you to kind of tell me about Avalanche as quick as you can and kind of make sure that when this elevator gets going again, I want to keep talking to you. So you got about a minute. Hit me with some vital statistics on Avalanche and why everyone should be paying attention.
Yeah, Ian. I think that's a great place to start. So, my name is Eric. I work for Avalance, the development company behind Avalanche. Avalanche in general is a layer 1 blockchain. What we strive to do is try to come up with the best solution, right, to the blockchain trilemma. And the trilemma, for those who don't know, is there's always a trade-off, right, between scalability, decentralization, and security. Avalanche, what underpins the network is a brand new way of doing consensus called the Avalanche Consensus Protocol. And what this allows the blockchain to do is, one, it's able to scale, right? Right now we have about 2.7 million wallets. The network does about between 2,000 to 4,500 transactions per second. So really good for dapps, really good for just ensuring a great user experience, right? And it also has low finality. I think right now it's probably the lowest in the industry among all blockchains, under a second. So all transactions are submitted, they're confirmed, finalized, and mutable under a second. In addition, our network scales in terms of validators. We have about 1,400 validators. where we rate on the Nakamoto coefficient, which measures decentralization among proof of stake networks, is right now we're at 27. Compared to other networks, most of the major ones are in the single digits. So it just shows you, how far along we are, right? And then in terms of security, I think it pretty much speaks for itself, right? Our network, hasn't been hacked yet. Fingers crossed. We haven't, there's barely been any slowdowns. No, no times where there's been outages due to something at the consensus level. So I think with all these points in mind, right, Avalanche is slowly becoming the best place, one of the best places for developers to build, and we're really proud of the ecosystem that we've developed here.
All right, cool. Pretty good, Eric. I'm in. I think we should keep talking, my man. So I've got a whole bunch of questions here. And as I said, audience questions might fly in, and I'll grab those as and when they do. Okay. So I think this is going to be a great AMA because I've been watching Avalanche myself for quite some time now. We integrated Avalanche quite a while ago on DappRadar, and since then I've been writing about your dapps. I've been kind of just keeping an eye there and seeing what's happening. And what I've seen is amazing growth. And but let's just backtrack slightly, Eric. So you've told us about Avalabs, which is the company behind Avalanche, which is who you work for. But how did you, as a person, end up in this crazy world of blockchain? Is this your sort of, is this where you've always worked, or did you transfer over from another industry? Tell us a bit about yourself, Eric.
Yeah. I've had a bit of a past life before crypto. So I started working in consulting basically right after I got out of school in 2015, and I was doing M&A advisory mostly at PwC, the big accounting giant, and I was mostly servicing private equity as well as Fortune 500 clients. And their mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, separations if they're splitting off a business. So pretty different from crypto, I would say in general. Very corporate, very buttoned up, right? I remember there was a night in 2017. I was sharing an apartment in New York as you do with a roommate. And my roommate comes into my room and he's like, "Oh, you've got to check out this new coin." And back then, right, I only heard of Bitcoin. I didn't really get into crypto too much. But he was like, "Oh, you gotta learn more about this coin. Buy it if you can." And I'm like, "Oh, what is it?" And he's like, "Oh, it's called Ethereum for short for Ethereum." And at the time, I had no idea, right?
What year was this, Eric? Just sorry, I missed that bit. What year was this? 19,
This
did you
is
say?
this was like 2017,
17. Okay,
2018.
cool.
Yeah. This was a bit back when ETH was still under $20. So I bought a little bit. I was like, okay, well, I don't know where this thing is gonna go. Obviously, I didn't buy enough, right? But and then fast forward, a year or two later, I started seeing all the developments on ETH, right? In terms of DeFi, I saw Compound, Uniswap, Aave, back then it was called ETHLend, come in. And at that point, I was like, hey, this space looks really interesting. It's developing fast, right? I've always wanted to be in a high growth industry. Consulting is cool too, but things move a little bit slower there.
Yeah.
And then I think I really took the leap of faith in 2020. I saw a posting, for Alva Labs for a BD role, and I just applied, and then got through the interview process and ended up joining the team. So, and looking back, right, it's probably one of the best decisions I've made in my life. Being in crypto is just so much more interesting. Things move so much quicker, and you're seeing innovation. You're at the forefront of innovation, right?
Yeah, man. So you've got a solid financial background, and I think that's an important thing, right? But your story is so similar to mine in 17. I remember I went to get my bike fixed actually, and the guy in the bike shop whose job it was to fix the bike started telling me about ETH and Bitcoin, and it was because of him. And this was when it was like $8, and I was like, yeah, all right, cool, I'll have a little pop. But same as you, like the hindsight hack comes out every week when I think about how much I should have bought and how much I actually bought. So it's funny, like people entered this crazy world in similar ways, I think. That's awesome, Eric. Like your background. So we've covered that. Can you tell us a bit more? So we're not going to get super deep on the technicals of Avalanche, and we'll jump into the mechanisms later and talk about the Avalanche solution, as it were. Can you tell us a bit about Avalanche as a solution and kind of what's the current market as far as you think for blockchain applications? What are you seeing on Avalanche?
Yeah, so I think I've gone a little bit into about how Avalanche kind of differentiates itself from other layer ones, right? But maybe even taking a step back, most of I guess the newer layer ones these days, Avalance, Solana, Polygon, BSC, like all those guys, were born out of necessity, right? For higher number of transactions, lower fees, mostly driven by, kind of Ethereum mainnet, right? And how that's become a bit congested these days. So I think we're all these layer ones, each layer one's a little bit different. Each layer one makes trade-offs between scalability, decentralization, all those common factors, right? But within each of these layer ones, you're seeing kind of a bit of similarities, right, in terms of how the ecosystems are developing. You have your cornerstone dapps, right, whether it be DeFi, whether it be gaming, and then you have a lot of ancillary primitives or aggregators, dapps building on top of each other, right? So I would say, broadly speaking, DeFi, we're still seeing, quite a bit of traction there. TVL has only increased over the past year, right, across all different chains. In terms of gaming, I think that's going to be the big one coming up this year. Not just your, typical play to earn games, right, but higher quality titles, right, AAA, AA titles that traditional gaming studios are working on that have, certain crypto components. And then, as a part of that, right, we'll see proliferation of NFTs, especially, in-game assets or multiverse assets, as well as, real world use cases coming on chain.
Definitely, man, and I can definitely tell you that the data that we see on a daily basis backs up your thinking as well, man. Like that's exactly where we're seeing things heading. And you touched on some important areas there, so we can speak about TVL a little bit as well, I think. And just a year ago, the total value locked, which is the amount of value stored in the smart contracts of Avalanche DeFi dApps, for clarification, there was just a little bit over 200 million. I checked this morning and you're over 14 billion a year. So who are the main contributors here? Which dApps are really shining through and kind of powering this TVL growth right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're thrilled to see the growth in the ecosystem. I think it's all come even faster than we expected, right? Before getting into the dApps, I think it's probably important to just cover the catalyst right behind what's been happening. I think number one, you have to offer a great blockchain platform, right? Both for builders and users. I think that was, primarily our focus for the better half of, the first half of last year, right? From, I would say, when mainnet launched in September 2020 through June of last year. And then, having a great base platform is good, but you have to have all the necessary infrastructure pieces, right? We created the Avalanche Bridge, which allows users to bridge cheaply, pretty quickly from Ethereum to Avalanche in a secure way. We actually are one of the few blockchains that have very robust RPC endpoints that we maintain in house. Right now, those endpoints get anywhere from 2 to 3 billion in daily calls, right? And then the other two pieces as relates to DeFi. Chainlink became live. I believe it was June of last year. That allowed a bunch of different use cases, but primarily the major money markets, right, like Banshee and Aave coming on. And then the other major catalyst, I would say, it began around July, which was Avalanche Rush. It was $180 million incentive program. It should be a lot higher now because that was valued at the price of AVAX in June.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah, back then. So
right?
yeah, it should be much higher than that. But then once those pieces were in place, first you started seeing a lot of the big Ethereum projects, right? Becoming multi-chain, expanding to Avalanche. Part of that group, Aave, Curve, Kyber, SushiSwap. I would say some have done better than others in terms of getting traction on Avalanche, getting users, volumes, right, etc. And then after that, we really focus on the native projects, making sure that the project's building here, making sure that innovation is building here, are properly rewarded, right? And that they're getting the attention they need, right? So you saw Benchy, you saw Pangolin, Trader Joe, Yield Yak, the list goes on. And then I think our focus right now is continuing to push that innovation, right? Making sure that if there is something new in DeFi, that we're aware of it and have are able to introduce that into the ecosystem. I think two of the biggest projects to watch out for these days are probably Platypus. It's a new type of stable swap. It's not a curve fork or anything. And then as well as Yeti Finance, which actually just launched this week. It allows users to deposit interest-bearing tokens in a cross-margin collateral type of way like Aave.
Got it. So it's kind of the initial. This is the same question I asked to a lot of networks, basically, and the answers are always quite similar about getting those DeFi getting the Legos in position first to create the foundation of the network, like you say, a bridge so that customers can come in and out of the platform easily. Then the supporting dApps to make sure that there's something to do once they're on Avalanche as well. So it's I've watched it grow and it's been super interesting, but the reason I ask the question is because I always find it interesting to know whether the native dApps, which you actually said, that's where the focus lies now, in pushing native dApps like Trader Joe, Crabada. When I say native, I just mean not cross-chain, basically, like Sushi, Aave. They've come over from Ethereum, right? So I mean, let's one of the most interesting dApps I think on Avalanche is Trader Joe, and we don't need to talk about it specifically, but I'm curious as to Trader Joe is a native Avalanche product, right? Was that built in like kind of cahoots with you guys, or was that just something that popped up and you were like, damn, this is great?
Yeah, I think Trader Joe's actually is a pretty good story. So it came about organically. The two founders, Cryptofish and Murloc, right? They basically came to us with that idea. They initially it wasn't anything glamorous or innovative. They were just basically forking Sushi Swap, right?
Okay.
But they set out with a goal in mind, which was to make Trader Joe the best place to trade assets, no matter what type of assets they are. I think for the most part at this point they've pretty much accomplished that goal, right? Trader Joe trade just the volumes on the DAX alone are some of the top in the industry, top 5, top 3 among all AMMs and no matter the chain. They also launched a lending product, and the lending product within I think the first week or two reached a billion TVL, right? And now they've done a token.
Eric's got an internet problem on his side, so we're just waiting. Oh, here he is. He's back.
Hey, can you hear me? What was the last thing that I said before I got off?
Hang on a second, man. Sorry. Did you lose your internet connection there, or did something
No,
strange?
my laptop went to sleep, so I just had to put this.
He's had enough. He's had
Yeah.
enough for today. We were talking about Trader Joe. It was an organic project. They kind of achieved what they wanted to in terms of providing an easy access kind of DEX. Um, man, we were talking about Trader Joe basically.
Okay. So yeah, they developed the DAX. They did a tokenomics revamp recently that basically diversifies the original XJO pool into basically three products, right? One is a stable yield product called SJO. One's a launch pad called Rocket Joe, and then they also have like a VE escrow token model for governance as well as boosted rates. And on top of that, they've also introduced a lending product that reached a billion TVL within the first week of release, pretty much. And then they also have an NFT marketplace on the horizon. So there's pretty much nothing that the Trader Joe's team isn't doing, and we're very much looking forward to supporting them throughout their process.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing they have going on over there, and I think we can't skip past the fact that Trader Joe as a platform is as complex as it gets in regards to DeFi mechanics and mechanisms and for traders. But the one thing that they kind of came out with was this gamified frontage to the whole thing. It feels a bit more friendly. I don't know, it's kind of a bit more psychological than anything, but it all feels quite friendly and fun. Or am I just seeing things here with Trader Joe?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think a large part of Joe's success, right, is due to its the great user experience in the platform. It's super simple to solve for assets. In fact, like before I got into the habit of using aggregators, I would always just automatically go to Trader Joe, right, because it's just so easy to use.
Yeah.
And you're really seeing that in the numbers as well, right? Any given day, they do about 200 mil to 500 mil in volume. And they also have like probably the largest community here on Avalanche, which is around 60K active users on any given week.
Massive, isn't it? And it also, Trader Joe, just for the record, accounts for a large chunk of the TVL on Avalanche as well, which is, you look at it and you think it's a bit of a game almost, and then to see how much of the TVL it holds is quite impressive. Along those same lines, one other project I saw popping out on Avalanche recently was Crabada, which kind of got my interest really early. I was like, oh, cool, a kind of proper play to earn game launching on Avalanche, and it's done really well over the past few weeks. I've been watching it and seeing how it's doing. Like, this is, I mean, I kind of want to ask you what you think about this whole sort of GameFi play to earn movement that's occurring right now. I mean, the data supports that it's driving new users in on a weekly basis. Everything's looking fabulous. What's your kind of thoughts on GameFi, Eric? Like, as a coming from a deep financial background, like, my opinion is that people do need to learn about these things, and that there's no better way than during a sort of gamified experience. But like, what do you think about this whole GameFi movement?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this movement. I've been a gamer throughout my life, so it's
Right.
really welcoming to see. And I think the analogy that Ed, who leads gaming on our side, likes to give is that just think about how much time you've spent right in your life playing video games if you're a gamer, and you've never seen a dime of that time right come back to you, and the hundreds thousands of hours right depending on how intense you are. There should be some aspect of rewarding people for their time, right? So GameFi I think really opens the door to that, right? In terms of asset ownership, asset value transfers, in terms of just having a robust marketplace, right, for different types of tokens or in-game assets. Crabada is a very interesting example of that, I think. And another, I guess, major benefit that people glance over is that gaming actually is one of the best ways to onboard people into crypto. I've had a lot of friends, right, that won't get in for the 100%, 1,000% APYs in DeFi, but they'll have no hesitation, right, putting a crab game on chain. So it's like, I think
Ever
people
asked them
underestimate that a
why?
little bit. I
Ever
don't
asked
I
them
don't
why?
know.
Like, I've asked a few people, and one answer I got was that it was just visually more appealing. So the guy was like, "It just looks nicer. I feel safer." And then I started going down the rabbit hole of why do you associate safety with visual beauty, and then it got all a bit diverse. But yeah, I kind of asked people why, but I think it's quite a basic thing, isn't it? Like, people need to enjoy what you're doing, and everybody knows that you can go and trade stocks and you can invest in the markets, but not everybody does it. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think eToro's got like 10 million users or something. That's a really small amount of people, given how many people there is on the planet. So this gamification seems to be a really clever way to onboard lots and lots of users, like you say, and they can have some fun with it, really. But yeah, I think it's an interesting topic like to talk about, and with Crabada as well. Like, how do you think that's going to roll out? Like, do you know anything about their kind of roadmap or anything, or can you reveal any plans that you've got with them?
Yeah, so with regards to Crabada, they're by the way, they're like one of the largest games across like all chains, right? I think on any
Right.
given day, right, the sales volume of their platform, I think they were number one like last week, higher than Axie, higher than Sandbox, some of the more well-known titles, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
do about 4 million transactions per week. Um, and I think it's a double-edged sword, right? They're almost a victim of their own success in a way, because the gas fees that are being paid out by the users are probably some of the high definitely the highest on the C chain so far. Right, and any given day, right, it's about 15 to 20% of total gas on the C chain.
That's just
So,
the congestion, right? The pure
hmm
congestion they're causing because it's
hmm
a game and a lot of transactions happening. Okay.
yeah, a lot of users, a lot of transactions. So what you begin to see is, a lot of games moving to their own chain, right? I think Axie, they pretty much almost started off as their own chain on Ronin, right? This is just so that games can scale, right? Without congesting the main network. Um, our solution to this, so Crabada right now is building their own subnet. Subnets, they're groups of validators on Avalanche technically, but people typically think of them as as private permission blockchains, right? Running parallel to the network. So right now, Crabada is looking to shift to a subnet model. They're going to use their TUS token as gas and have validators also stake their governance token, the CRA token. And what's really interesting about the subnet is that not only can they deploy the main Crabada game on the subnet, but they can host other games as well. And that just adds additional token utility to the TUS token, but also it just increases collaboration between different GameFi projects.
Sure, and it also means you don't lose them as a project, right? Like they're still staying with Avalanche, which I imagine is super important, given how much contribution they're making to the volume and the transactions and users. It's that's really interesting that that's going to sort of play out. Is that something that's going to be happening this year? Because like I've also seen this, that these game projects are sort of branching off to their own blockchains, like DeFi Kingdoms did the same thing. And yeah, I guess the host network loses the benefit then, right? In that case. But with you guys, that won't happen, right? Because it's a subnet.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also something that validators also have to validate the main network. So there's always that a bit of tether, right, to the main Avalanche chain, even if they are running a subnet. I would say that between us and the Crabada team, we're very very close. We talk to them, work with them pretty much pretty much on a daily basis. So that when they're deploying their subnet, right, if they have any questions, and this goes for any project deploying a subnet, right, they can easily get those questions answered. And the other thing with the subnet is actually coming out, I believe it's next month, early to mid May. And then once that's out, right, users are able to kind of migrate their assets. Users are able to really experience, right, what it's like to to game on its own chain, its own subnet and Avalanche.
Nice, man, nice. So we briefly touched on gas fees there a little bit, and right at the start of this whole thing, we said that Avalanche was kind of born out of necessity, as were other networks. The Ethereum scaling just seemed impossible at that moment, and it was just clogged up. And that again, like born out of necessity, there was a need for networks like Avalanche. But can you tell us about like the sort of onboarding? Actually, no, sorry. Let's talk about gas fees first. So the gas fees on Avalanche. What's the kind of average gas fee that someone should expect to pay for a simple trade, like swapping one token to another, for example?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way we view gas fees and Avalanche, if we're talking about the C chain specifically, right? It's EVM compatible, so it comes with all the benefits, right? The composability of the EVM, ability to build it, deploy in Solidity, right? But it also comes with the downsides, which is that as um, as the chain gets more congested, there's only so many transactions you could fit in the block and so many blocks being produced, right? That there's just natural bottlenecks. So I would say that the gas fees are low compared to Ethereum for sure. But they're not as low as some of the other chains that are either more decentralized or subsidized gas even, right, on their end. Right now, to do a swap, it's anywhere from I would say 30 cents to $1. And then for more complex transactions, right, it could be like, $2 to $5. So it's not high by any means, but we definitely are keeping close eye on it. And then the other thing with gas, right, you can't set the fees too low where you can just spam the network, have bots, right, basically running the network. So what we've done is basically a compromise, right? For the average user, just using DeFi dapps, maybe playing some games, the fees are very low, especially when there's no congestion in the network. But with dynamic fees, if there is congestion, then the fees scale up. And also, if a user is spamming the network, right? Let's say a bot just making hundreds of transactions a minute, then for that specific address, the rates are also throttled. So there's a couple of ways, and it's all built by design, right? None of this was kind of like just an accident, and it kind of just worked out this way, right?
No, I think it's a really strong point. Like, especially when we talk about transactions and that different dApps require a different level of transaction number. Like with a DeFi dApp, User might come and make 3 transactions, for example, on chain. So, a couple of dollars, cool. If you're playing a game like Crabada and you're playing it for like 6 to 8 hours, you might complete like 200 transactions. Hence why you said what you said previously as well. So I always like to kind of outline that. I think it's quite important. People perhaps don't quite understand what transactions mean. So in games and DeFi, it's kind of two very different things, to be honest. But how does so the gas fees are pretty good, like, a couple of dollars. And I think it's important to mention again that about botting, and if the fees are too low, that the network can be overrun. So it's an important part of the design, as you say, Eric. It's built in. So what does Avalanche do to kind of incentivize its users and to like onboard people? Like, why? How do you get people into Avalanche? Like, how do you get people off Ethereum and over onto Avalanche using your dexes and using your dapps?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of components to this, right? Number one, you have to get the word out. You have to have, a community that is able to spread news about new developments, new projects, right? Organically, and that's something that we built up over time, right? I think we started out last year with sub 100K users, and then recently I think we're either close to or just hit the 700K mark. So that was all done organically. We didn't pay for influencers or any of that. And then the other key piece for us, especially on the DeFi side, right, is just incentivizing users the proper way. I think for any sort of budding ecosystem, it's really important to get retail involved, right? Get people trying to use the dApps. I think inherently there's a lot of risk in terms of moving assets to a new chain. And when I say new chain, right, I'm talking more about last year when sub 1 year in Avalanche's development, right? So there's a bit of a barrier in terms of people's willingness to try something new. The analogy we like to give is and back in the early days of ride sharing, right, when Uber, Lyft, a bunch of other companies were competing for market share. A lot of the companies offer user incentives, free rides or $25 voucher, right? And the idea was you only offer it to first time users, but hopefully after they've experience the platform itself, right? They stay and continue using the service, and that's kind of a similar here, right? Incentives are mainly used to drive users in, and then once those incentives run out, then our bet is that users will stay for the chain, the reliability of the chain, speed, security, right? For the good UX of the dApps building here, and also for the Avalanche community. And so far, I think that's panned out the way we had intended.
Yeah, not bad, not bad at all. Yeah, I'd
Not
agree
bad
with
so far.
I think the other point there is as well is that what you said about the DApp ecosystem as well, ensuring that the right things are in place, the bridge, the decks, to make sure that when people come over, there's something for them to do, and that it kind of way, if you're bringing traders over from Ethereum, you've kind of got to mirror what they're doing over there, right? But for cheaper. So it's just yeah, I can see why Avalanche has kind of grown in its stature, as it were. So to onboard users, you've incentivized, which is a pretty common technique as well. But who would you say Avalanche is kind of geared up towards? Obviously, we've spoken about Trader Joe and we spoke about Crabada, but a lot of the dApps on Avalanche are DeFi and it's finance related. Would you say that Avalanche has got a vision to kind of put itself in that focus of DeFi, or is it broadly for anyone who wants to build anything that can be scaled?
Yeah, not at all. Avalanche is very much a all-purpose, general purpose platform. We welcome people to, build here, develop new use cases, really experiment, right, with what's possible with crypto and blockchain. So I would say DeFi, there's a great ecosystem here of DeFi dApps. I think we're continuing to push the envelope there. Gaming, like I mentioned before, will be a big focus of ours. And then beyond that, right, real world use cases, bringing in institutional adoption, especially within DeFi, and also just expanding the NFT cultural side of things, right?
Okay, nice, nice, nice. All right, Eric, let's get a little bit technical. Now, I know you're not the tech guy, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, and feel free to tell me to shut up if I go too deep on it. I'm also not a tech guy, so let's hope we can keep this pretty light. one of the key things about Avalanche is that differentiates it, and we mentioned this earlier, it differentiates it from other decentralized networks, is the consensus mechanism. To date, there's been three approaches to consensus, and it's the classical approach, the Nakamoto approach, the Avalanche approach. Can you tell us a bit about the sort of history of the Avalanche approach? Was it, did you always go out looking to achieve this, and what is it, and why is it so good?
Yeah. So consensus, I would say for those of you in the audience who may be unacquainted, right? It's really the lowest common denominator. It's really the bottleneck for most distributed systems platforms, right? It's the process of which participants in the network come to an agreement on whether transactions are valid or malicious, and whether or not to approve them, right? So there's, like you said, right, there's been three main approaches to this day. You start off with classical, right, which was developed in, I would say, the 1970s. It's what underpins a lot of the payment networks these days, including Visa and MasterCard. But it's also what a lot of proof of stake networks these days use. Classical is really good in terms of speed, but the limitations come with the number of network participants, right? Typically, in classical consensus networks, you can only support 50 to 100 validators maybe before there's significant degradations, right? So limits the amount of decentralization you're able to do. But really good for centralized services like Visa or MasterCard, right? Because it's fast, it's cheap, and you don't really need that many participants, right? You don't want that many participants even. And then I would say came Nakamoto, right? Which really allows for a large number of network participants to participate, but at the cost of kind of the speed, right, of classical. You saw this first with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and Ethereum is moving to a proof of stake system, but I would say that the traditional proof of work stuff, right? You've seen the benefits and downsides firsthand. And then the innovation that we're bringing to the table is the Avalanche consensus, which, in our view, really combines the best of Nakamoto and classical, right? You can have a decentralized network of validators. Right now we've got 1,400, but you can scale that up to millions, right? It's fast and cheap relative to your typical kind of Nakamoto consensus, right? And the other thing that Avalanche does very well is also guarantee a very low time to finality. That initial bottleneck, right, that I was talking about kind of in the beginning of this whole rant, Avalanche finality is under a second. On-chain finality, I think we've clocked it at anywhere from 400 to 800 milliseconds. And then the other kind of delays are just due to the UIs of different dApps, due to kind of the messaging, right, outside of what's going on in the mempool.
Got it. So it's like you've taken two approaches, best elements of the two approaches, advanced them, and created the Avalanche approach, which seemingly seems to work for you guys. So yeah, nice. Thank you for explaining that, Eric. I think there's some confusion around what that means precisely. I see it, we see it a lot in the literature about Avalanche. So I wanted to clear that up a little bit for everybody. So how can developers get involved with Avalanche? Are there bounty programs? Do you have support for them? And also something I always ask as well is this just financial support, or do you extend support in operations, in marketing, in finance? How far does your support stretch in terms of app development teams? Because we know that sometimes they're just a couple of guys in a basement with an amazing idea. So if they want to work with Avalanche, how can they do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And our support, broadly speaking, pretty much covers all of that, right? I think starting at the base level for developers, you have to have good docs. We're religious about updating our docs on our website, making sure everything's readable, plain English, right? Translated into, I think 20 plus languages now. You have to have, pretty much constant 24/7 support. Right now, anyone can ping our developers in our Discord channel, which is just the Avalanche official Discord, and they'll get a response. I would say within for sure within the day, probably within an hour, and at most technical questions. And then once you have that, right, those are the foundational pieces. then you start looking beyond, let's once the developers are in our ecosystem, what kind of support can we offer them? So on the marketing side, we market with pretty much all projects, right? As long as the teams are docs, as long as the proper security measures are in place, right? We make sure that they get some form of publicity either through like a retweet on our channel. For some of the larger engagements, we'll do full length blog posts, and these speaking arrangements, right? Either on Twitter or within Telegram, Discord, whatever it may be. The other thing we do is provide a lot of guidance, right? In terms of projects when they're developing, when they're we opine on tokenomics. We help them structure their fundraising if they're looking to do that. We connect them with various players, investors in the ecosystem, just making sure that they're fully plugged in, right? And then the last piece is just the financials, right? We do invest in projects, especially early stage Avalanche native projects through our Blizzard fund. I got covered incentives earlier. Those are mostly for DeFi projects. We launched a new program for Subnets as well. It's called Multiverse. So for anyone familiar, they should definitely check that out. And then the other thing we do is, for very early stage projects, we also provide grants in the form of, just money to cover development costs, get them to the next stage, so that they're able to, have like an MVP at least right before they start going fundraising.
Nice. I think it's very cool that you came to the finance part as the last part, Eric. I think that's really good. Like, there's money is great, right? But you can't do anything with it if you don't know what you're doing. So it's really great to hear that Avalanche are supporting from all angles. And I think how can they? So if there's anyone listening now that's interested in this, what's the best way for them to reach out in that regard, in the development regard? Is it to go to the website? Is it to shout on Discord? What's the best channels for that?
Yeah, you can reach us on multiple different platforms. Most of our guys are on Twitter, Telegram, so feel free to ping us there. We also have for Discord. Discord is more on the technical side of things, right? If you have technical questions, our developer is always there, and answering different members of the community. And then I would say that the other things too, just keep an eye on our our socials, right? Most of the major announcements come out on Twitter first and foremost. We also have two podcasts. One is with Goon, called All Access, where he sheds a lot of light into things we're developing, things in the horizon. And then there's another one called the Subnet Show that's hosted by Gabriel, I believe, as well as Connor on our team. And they, every week or two, they bring in a new guest, talk about either a developer on the team or someone external to the team, and then talk about what's going on the technical side.
Very nice. So there's a lot of comms outreach happening from your side in order for people to get to know. So in a nutshell, I'd say keep up to date on Twitter to get the first releases of everything, and then head over to Discord if you've got more technical questions. Okay, cool, man, cool. I've got a question, Eric. It's quite a funny question. I'm going to ask you anyway, but you might need to tread carefully on the answer, all right? So give me one sec. Right, it's come in on message, so I'm just going to read it out word for word. I don't know how this question sounds, but I just feel I should ask, because Ian, you said there are no stupid questions. So please give me a few reasons why I should choose Avalanche over Solana, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, and other layer 1 networks. By the way, I really love Trader Joe. It's a good question. It's a good question, but careful, Eric.
Yeah, I'm just gonna talk about Avalanche. So I think Avalanche, from a user experience, right? It's the fees are low, transactions are fast, confirmations happen pretty much instantly. So from a user experience, it's a great chain to experience some of these dapps, right? That might be more expensive or might not function properly, right, on other chains. I would say that we spend a lot of time developing our ecosystem, building up our community, right? So once users on board, they may they come for the incentives, but they really stay, right, for everything else. There's just so much to do here. And then the other thing I will mention is that our chain has never really been offline. I don't think.
I was kind of hoping. I was going to say that as well, but I'm glad you said it rather than me.
Yeah, and we always prioritize the uptime and security of the network. over everything else, right? There's been times where there might be a product release, and we've asked them to delay it so that we can make some pretty critical upgrades. Just a few examples, right? And I think as a result, you're seeing that Avalanche is quickly making a name for itself by being just a reliable network that works all the time. And I think it's like
super important, right? Like we're kind of laughing about it, but it's so important. Like it's so important. You've got such a myriad of competitors, and uptime should be a big metric that you're judged on. Like it's a big thing, right?
Yeah, especially in DeFi, right? Where you might be locking up, if you're an institution, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets, and you don't want to not have access to those assets. Let's just put it that way.
That would be some scary stuff, right? No, I think it's a really important point, Eric, and we're not joking about it. Like, I think the problem sometimes occurs because people like you and I are so involved in this. When we speak about these things, it's kind of funny because we're like, this is obvious, but it's not always so obvious, right? So again, it's a good reason to do these AMAs, I think. We're getting towards the end, so I want to kind of pick your brains a little bit on the wider kind of vision for DeFi and blockchain this year. Excuse me. And the question I've got is, where do you think the smart money is going in 2022? Like, we've looked at investments recently, and it seems to be pouring into gaming. What kind of services do you think you'll see emerge on Avalanche and just generally this year?
Yeah, I think NFTs, they're going to continue to explode, but I think in a different way, right? I think a lot of last year was spent on investing in these profile pic NFTs that may or may not have value, right, in the short to medium term. I think this year we're going to see a lot more real world use cases, the more successful PFPs, right? I think you were talking about Yuga Labs at the beginning of the call. They're turning into more of traditional media companies almost, right?
Yes.
Releasing content across different platforms. And then I think with the real world use cases, we're going to see a lot of them centered around ownership of assets, either physical assets or metaverse assets in the metaverse. And then I think the other thing we're going to see is that GameFi is going to continue to evolve, be developed. Games are going to be released. They have longer timelines, so most of them on Avalanche are going to be released towards the latter half of this year, early next year. And then, obviously DeFi is going to continue to quietly innovate, right? With new protocols. I think a big piece of DeFi going into next year is going to be, institutional adoption, right? How do institutions get into the space? How do they do it in a regular compliant manner?
Absolutely. And that's something that you, as given your history, should be quite savvy on, right, Eric? Like, you obviously, know a lot about it already, but in terms of the DeFi side of things, I mean, I don't think we're going to see any radical changes this year, but do you think, and this is a really kind of big question, and you can give me a small answer, but do you think DeFi will eventually become the go-to for financial control by people in the mainstream? Do you think it will always be a subset of people who believe in something different? I think we can get to where we want to go.
Yeah, I believe so. There's already a good amount of institutions like traditional funds involved in DeFi, either directly or indirectly, right? There's companies whose entire businesses are built on getting those rails in place and making sure that the onboarding is as easy and compliant as possible for institutions. One thing that we are working on here internally with a bunch of partners is this idea of a institutional subnet. And with that, and subnets, right, taking GameFi is obviously the primary use case right now, but taking that same framework, right, of being able to deploy blockchains as you see fit, you can actually develop a group of subnets that allow for KYC, allow for access controls, geo-blocking. It checks whether you're a accredited investor or not, right? Directly right on the chain at the chain level. So you've seen, certain types of tokens being used for NFT. You've seen for access. You've seen different AMMs and lending platforms offer, specific pools, right, where you have to essentially be KYC to get in. But we're taking all of that and doing it at the chain level. So, it removes the need for smart contracts. It removes the need for very complex smart contracts to be built, which should reduce some of the gas and some of the friction, right? But also allows for just a higher degree of flexibility. The idea is any user who wants to get into subnet, wants to participate, right, needs to go through a standard process. And once they're in, and all the counterparties can be assured that all the other counterparties have gone through the same sort of cycle.
Interesting. So some people were kind of speculating that the number of blockchains might decrease, whereas in other worlds we're thinking we're going to get more subnets and that dapps will run on their own networks uniquely almost. Interesting, interesting. Things could get far more complicated before they get easier, I think, perhaps, Eric.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a multi-chain future, and I think with more chains being developed, right, interoperability is only going to get better and better. We're going to see some scary things happen, like we have for the first 3 months, 4 months of this year, and that's going to continue to happen, right, as we move the industry forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think scary things also provide opportunity, right? And like we've seen recently with the Ronin hack and bridge exploits, this just puts more emphasis on the fact that people need to tighten up and focus in these areas. So it's only through evolution we can get better. And I think there's such a big magnifying glass on crypto most of the time. Everything gets sensationalized, but what we're talking about is just the evolution of an industry, I think, pretty much. All right, cool, man. Eric, we've got a couple of minutes left, but I've left my last question. Tell us what's in the pipeline for Avalanche in 2022. We just spoke about subnet, so that's obviously going to be a big focus for you guys, but why should people be even more excited about Avalanche now at the end of this call than they were at the beginning? Like, what's going to pop in the next sort of 8 months?
Yeah, subnets are going to be a big focus. Right now, there's not too many games live, but you'll see that start to shift towards the latter half of this year. We have a bunch of AAA, AA titles, as well as your kind of typical play to earn games. You also see a lot of different use cases for subnets outside of gaming, right? I think for example, having an NFT marketplace on a subnet makes a lot of sense because you don't really need that much composability with regards to NFTs, but also there's a lot of transactions, a lot of users on most of these platforms, right? That's why they tend to be a bit more centralized. We're releasing a new native wallet. It's called Core. It's going to support everything on Avalanche C chain as well as subnets, right, as they're spun up. It's going to provide a much faster experience compared to some of the options currently on the market today. We are also adding Bitcoin support to the Avalanche bridge. It will allow people to bridge Bitcoin directly from that network directly onto Avalanche without having to go through the intermediate step, right, of wrapping it on Ethereum and then bridging it over. And then the other thing is that I'm personally excited for, right, and I think we touched upon it, just the institutional use cases, right, onboarding traditional finance companies as well as Fortune 500s into crypto, making their processing more efficient, allowing the users to either earn rewards or leverage DeFi in some sort of way. So really excited to see that all come to fruition.
Nice, man. So it sounds like a great combination of increased trading volume, increased awareness, institutional money trying to flood in. Really good stuff for Avalanche this year by the sounds of it, or anybody who's listening. Okay, cool, man. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you weren't put off by my questions. It was all casual, I hope, for you. And yeah, you've done a great job articulating what Avalanche and Avalabs is all about and why people should be paying attention, I think. So thank you very much, man. Maybe you want to give a shout out to the listeners and just say thank you.
Yeah, appreciate everyone hopping on. Thanks for having me, Ian. This was this is a lot of fun. If anyone has any questions after this, feel free to ping me on Twitter. My handle is exk200. Or if you have any more technical questions, we're always there in our Discord. So yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone in the Avalanche community.
I get all those developer-focused messages in your Twitter inbox tomorrow morning, Eric, about how to create subnets. That'll be fun for you tomorrow.
That's usually how it goes.
But I think also, I just want to mention, it's for me personally, and probably a lot of people listening, you see a network, you see Avalanche, you see them grow, you see them change, you see them evolve, but you don't know who's responsible for it. It's been really cool to speak to you today to get an idea of the people behind Avalanche and Avalabs and understand better, you know, the ethos and what's driving you guys to succeed. So very cool. Thank you very much for your answers, man. You did a great job. Right, that brings us to the end of the show. I'm just going to wrap up by telling you that tomorrow at 3 p.m. UTC, we've got another DApp Market Movers. They're going to be diving into bridges. We did an exclusive report with Defiant recently, given all the bridge hacks and exploits that have been happening. And yeah, we've taken a deep dive into that topic alongside Camilla Russo. So yeah, take a look and tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. UTC, and they will dive in and sort of unpack all of the details there. Once again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to my guest, Eric from Avalanche. And yeah, I hope again we get to meet up in a couple of months, Eric, maybe at the end of the year. Start talking about some hot gaming projects and some other things that are happening, and maybe your TVL's doubled again, right?
Yeah, hopefully. All right. Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of your day, Ian.
Okay, Eric.
Catch
Nice
you
to
later.
speak to you. All right, guys. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you all next week.